Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello everyone, I am Dr. Shabnam Mehlawat, Associate Professor from the Faculty of Law, University of Delhi. This is my lecture number 6 and I will be talking on the Convention on Biological Diversity 1992. The overview for Convention on Biological Diversity, which is also known as the CBD in short, is known as the Biodiversity Convention. It is a multilateral treaty with 3 main goals. It is conserving biodiversity, ensuring its sustainable use and promoting fair sharing of genetic resource benefits. Firstly is sustainable use of resources, and then we are whatever benefits we derive from using those resources, they will go to benefit the public at large. So, this is fair sharing which is done in an accountable manner. It opened for signature at the Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro in 1992 and it entered into force in December 29, 1993 with the exceptions of the United States. It has 2 main supplementary agreements, the Cartagena Protocol of 2003 on biosafety and the Nagoya Protocol on access to genetic resources. The Nagoya Protocol, adopted on October 29, 2010, entered into force on October 12, 2014. The CBD's strategic plan for biodiversity 2011 to 2020 includes the Aichi biodiversity targets. The conference of the parties are held periodically with COP15 taking place in China and Montreal, Canada. In marine biodiversity, the CBD focuses on identifying ecologically or biologically significant marine areas to support conservation and sustainable use beyond national jurisdiction. So, the Convention on Biological Diversity, it was drafted on 22nd May 1992. It was signed on 5th June 1992 till 1993 and is in several languages. It was held in Rio de Janeiro. It is effective from 29 December, which is ratified by the 30 states and 196 states parties with the depository with the Secretary General of the United Nations. It is a multilateral environmental agreement. The conceptualization of the convention is, it was conceived at the United Nations Environment Program meeting in November 1988. This year, the ad hoc working committee of the technical and legal experts was established for the drafting of a legal text that addressed the conservation and sustainable use of biological diversity, as well as sharing of benefits arising from their utilization with sovereign states and the local communities. In 1991, an intergovernmental negotiating committee was established, which was tasked with finalizing the convention's text. Initial discussions led to the establishment of the ad hoc working committee of the technical and legal experts in 1989, prior to the negotiations of 1991. The drafting process and the adoption and entry into forces in 1991, Intergovernmental Negotiation Committee was formed to finalize the convention's text. The conference for adoption of the agreed textbook took place in Nairobi, Kenya in 1992. The convention's text was opened for signature in 1992 at the Earth Summit and it received 168 signatures by its closing date on June 4, 1993. Then finally, it entered into force in 29 December 1990. The key principles and philosophy is, it recognizes biodiversity conservation as a common concern of humankind. It covers all ecosystems, species and genetic resources. It links conservation efforts to sustainable use and fair benefit sharing. Legally, it is legally binding on the member countries who are signatories to the convention and who have agreed to abide by its protocols. The philosophy of sustainable use is it shifts focus from protecting specific species to sustainable use of ecosystems and genes, and it stresses the importance of using biological resources without causing long-term biodiversity decline. It also makes use of the precautionary principle with its environmental impact assessment, with its reports which are prepared, with its screening, scoping, licensing and monitoring activities, which forms a part of that precautionary principle. It urges action in the faces of threats to biodiversity even without full scientific certainty. It emphasizes the need for proactive measures to avoid or minimize threats. The benefits, investments and development. The benefit and investments are, it highlights the significant environmental, economic and social benefits of biodiversity conservation. It acknowledges the need for substantial investment in conservation efforts. That is, when we are utilizing the biodiversity resources for economic purposes, we must look back into our environmental efforts for the purpose of protection and conservation of those resources, so they do not get overexploited, they do not perish, and we also carry on with our economic activity in a systematic manner. This would lead to overall social benefits of the community and the people who are making use of them. So, the recent developments are, in the 2010 amendment, it banned certain forms of geoengineering, reflecting ongoing efforts to address emerging environmental challenges. The key features of the convention are, as I stated, conserving biodiversity. Now, what is biodiversity? Diversity in the form of biological resources, natural resources which are present and in different forms. It together as a constituent or as a part of the ecosystem, it forms biodiversity. Ensuring the sustainable use of these resources, and then the fair sharing of genetic resource benefits. After a person makes use of this resource, it makes out a product. That product can be asked to be questioned how that product is beneficial, and when it is established that it is a beneficial product, it can be shared amongst the community for everybody to derive benefit of its, firstly of its research, then of its production, and finally of its distribution to people to whom it has worked in a beneficial manner. Issues which are to be addressed by the convention were, there were measures to incentivize conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity. It is aligned with the principles of 1992 Convention on Biological Diversity, incentivizing conservation and sustainable use, implementing financial mechanisms, market-based instruments, access and benefit sharing mechanisms, capacity building initiatives. These are where you build that capacity where you do not overexploit. Then robust legal frameworks, frameworks which channelizes activities to be carried out in a regulated manner. Community empowerment strategies, that if a certain activity is benign and if a resource and a small amount is used, then it would benefit the entire community and not a single person. And fostering research and innovation, these efforts aim to engage stakeholders, promote equitable resource sharing and empower communities to become stewards of biodiversity for long-term conservation and sustainable development goals. The regulated access to genetic resources and traditional knowledge with prior informed consent. Now, what is regulated? That is, we go through a proper channel, we go through a proper procedure to access these resources, utilize our traditional knowledge which is ancient, but which is applied in a very in a manner which is not detrimental to this biodiversity resource, and with prior information to make utilization of the same. The regulated access to genetic resources and traditional knowledge coupled with prior informed consent forms a cornerstone of biodiversity governance. This framework ensures that individuals or entities seeking to utilize these genetic resources or traditional knowledge must first obtain the consent from the relevant authorities or communities, as the case may be, depending on from case to case. The PIC empowers indigenous people and local communities to control access to their resources and knowledge, safeguarding their rights and interests too. Moreover, regulating access helps prevent biopiracy and ensures the fair and equitable benefit sharing from the commercialization of these genetic resources. By promoting transparency and respect for indigenous knowledge systems, the PIC contributes to the conservation of biodiversity and the preservation of our cultural heritage, which may be in the form of a knowledge, which may be in the form of utilization of a particular resource, or the manner or the procedure in which that resource is being made use of. Then is fair and equitable sharing of benefits from these genetic resource utilization. The concept of fair and equitable sharing of benefits from these resources utilization emphasizes ensuring that benefits derived from the commercial or the research use of these genetic resources are distributed fairly among all stakeholders, including indigenous communities and countries of origin. That is, wherever a resource is placed, the access may be made in a regulated manner, research may be conducted, and a product may come out. If it is a very beneficial product, then it should be distributed, is the concept where fair and equitable sharing of benefit works. This is often can be seen in the case of medicines. It is used as an example that when medicinal qualities are found in a plant or a herb, that plant may be utilized by way of a research first if the effects are not known. Then after a research is conducted, a medicine may be produced, and that medicine may work as a benefit for all. So, the benefit sharing starts from fair and equitable sharing of benefits of these resources can be carried out in a responsible manner. This principle, enshrined in international agreements like the Convention on Biological Diversity, aims to address historical injustice, empower the local communities who are responsible and are guardians of such reserves and resources, and foster sustainable development. By promoting a transparent and mutually agreed benefit sharing mechanism, it encourages collaboration, it respects the traditional knowledge, and it provides economic incentives for conservation efforts. Ultimately, it aims to strike a balance between conservation objectives and socio-economic development while upholding ethical principles. The access to and transfer of technology, including biotechnology. Now, biotechnology is a part of when biological resources are used for various purposes. A technology is developed, that technology should be beneficial, and with the help of that technology, we are able to utilize those resources in a beneficial manner. The access to and transfer of technology, including biotechnology, are pivotal for fostering sustainable development and addressing global challenges. It ensures equitable access to technology. It enables developing countries to leverage innovation for economic growth, environmental protection, and social progress. Biotechnology in particular holds promise for enhancing agricultural productivity, improving health care, and mitigating climate change impacts. Facilitating technology transfer through partnerships, capacity building, and knowledge sharing initiatives strengthens international cooperation and promotes inclusive development. By bridging the technological divide, countries can harness the transformative potential of biotechnology to tackle pressing issues and build a more resilient and prosperous future for all. The promotion of technical and scientific cooperation. To utilize the natural resources or the bioresource reserves, one must have a technology so that we can implement the same for a beneficial use for all. Promoting technical and scientific cooperation is essential for advancing knowledge sharing innovation and problem solving on a global scale. By fostering collaboration among scientists, researchers, and institutions, countries can collectively address complex challenges such as climate change, public health, and biodiversity loss. Technical and scientific cooperation facilitates the exchange of expertise data and resources, leading to the development of sustainable solutions and the enhancement of scientific capacity worldwide. Through joint research projects, training programs and collaborative initiatives, countries can leverage diverse perspectives and interdisciplinary approaches to tackle pressing issues and promote inclusive, evidence-based policy making for the benefit of the current and the future generations. There should be a coordination of a global taxonomy directory. The coordination of a global taxonomy directory is crucial for standardizing and organizing information about the world's biodiversity. Such a directory serves as a comprehensive reference tool, facilitating efficient species identification, classification and data sharing among scientists, researchers and conservationists worldwide. By centralizing taxonomic information in a unified database, it streamlines research efforts, enables cross-disciplinary collaboration and enhances our understanding of species distribution and evolution. Moreover, such a directory supports conservation initiatives by providing a reliable foundation for monitoring biodiversity trends, assessing conservation status and prioritizing conservative actions. Ultimately, it plays a pivotal role in biodiversity conservation and sustainable management efforts on a global scale. The environmental impact assessment. Now, this assessment is essentially a part of the precautionary principle, where it says an assessment should be made out of an activity, the environmental impacts should be studied and only then it should be given a clearance for the purposes of running, with the license being given to that industry after the impact assessment is carried out. So, the environmental impact assessment, as referenced in biodiversity conferences, plays a crucial role in evaluating the potential ecological consequences of a proposed action on biodiversity. These assessments, often discussed in conferences on biodiversity conservation, analyze the effect of development projects, policy changes or management strategies on ecosystems, species and habitats. By identifying potential threats and proposing mitigation measures, the EIAs, as they are referred to in short, help safeguard the biodiversity while balancing human needs and environment protection. The findings into biodiversity policies and strategies ensures that the decisions are made in an informed manner by the scientific evidence and promoting sustainable development practices that minimize the harm to the biodiversity and enhance ecosystem resilience. The initiatives for education and public awareness to be created about biodiversity involves the education and public awareness initiatives with central themes of biodiversity conventions, recognizing the critical role of informed citizens in conservation efforts, raising awareness about the importance of biodiversity, the threats it faces and actions to be taken in order to protect it is a part of that initiative. Conferences often discuss strategies to integrate biodiversity education into the formal curriculum, develop outreach programs, leverage media and technology for broader dissemination of information. By empowering communities with knowledge and fostering a sense of stewardship, education and awareness initiatives, they catalyze grassroots support for conservation, collective action drive for preserving biodiversity for our future generations. The provision of financial resources. The financial resources is a pivotal agenda item in biodiversity conferences, recognizing the need for funding to support conservation and sustainable management efforts. Discussions revolve around mobilizing funds from diverse sources, including public, private and international donors to finance biodiversity projects and initiatives. The conference emphasizes the importance of allocating adequate resources for protected area management, habitat restoration, species conservation and community-based initiatives. Additionally, debates have often focused on innovating financing mechanisms such as payments for ecosystem services and biodiversity offsets to incentivize conservation practices and ensure sustainable funding streams. Ultimately, securing financial resources is essential for achieving the biodiversity conservation targets and facing the environmental challenges which are related to environment effectively. 10th point is obligation for national reporting on treaty implementation efforts. So, nations are urged to provide comprehensive reports which detail their efforts in implementing the biodiversity related treaties, actions they have taken, the challenges which they have faced and the outcomes which they have achieved. These reports facilitate the transparency, they bring about accountability of respective stakeholders and peer review among countries driving collection action towards meeting international biodiversity targets. The discussions often revolve around improving reporting mechanisms, enhances data quality and supporting capacity building initiatives to ensure all nations can fulfill their reporting obligations effectively. By promoting information exchange and mutual earning, national reporting plays a vital role in advancing global biodiversity conservation efforts. What are the international bodies established by the convention? These are Conference of the Parties or the COP meetings as they are commonly referred to. COP meetings are also held under the Convention on Climate Change and COP meetings are also held under the Convention on Biological Diversity. It is a governing body comprising ratified government members. It reviews progress, identifies priorities and sets work plans. The authority needs to, if it needs to make amendments, establish advisory bodies and collaborate with other organizations. Then there is a secretariat which is established for the purpose of working of the convention. It operates under the aegis of the United Nations Environment Programme in Montreal, Canada. It organizes meetings, drafts documents and assists member governments. It coordinates with international organizations and disseminates information. Then comes the subsidiary body for scientific, technical and technological advice or the SABASTA, which is the committee of expert members advising COP on scientific and technical matters. It provides assessments and recommendations on biodiversity status and measures. It has met 23 times as of 2020 with further meetings which are scheduled. Then comes the subsidiary body on implementation. It was established in 2014 to enhance implementation efforts. It reviews progress, strategizes actions, strengthens means of implementation and oversees operations. It holds meetings periodically with the current chair being Ms. Charlotta Solves of Sweden, the parties to the convention. As of 2016, 196 parties include 195 states and the European Union. All United Nations member states except the United States have ratified. The non-UN members like Cook Islands, New and the state of Palestine have ratified. The Holy See and the states with limited recognition are non-parties. The United States position is they have signed but not ratified due to Senate approval requirements and they are blocked by the Republican Party senators. The Cartagena Protocol, which is a very important protocol, and where action work was defined under the convention. It is also related to international trade. It was created by the European Union in the year 2000 to enhance biosafety regulation. It has its impact on domestic regulations significant, impact on international trade law uncertain. The WTO ruling in 2006 found the European Union violated trade law but refrained from invalidating regulations. The implementation by the parties, the national biodiversity strategies and action plans. This forms the principal instrument for implementing the convention at the national level. It requires countries to develop strategies and integrate them into the sectoral planning as well as the legal framework. 173 countries have developed the strategies and action plans by the early 2012. The country examples are the UK, New Zealand and Tanzania, which demonstrate elaborate conservative efforts. The United States showcases species recovery programs and conservation mechanisms despite not ratifying. Singapore established a comprehensive national biodiversity strategy and an action plan, and then there are the national reports prepared by various countries. These parties prepare reports on the convention implementation, their status, and they are mandated by Article 26 of the convention. The protocols and plans that have developed by under the Convention on Biodiversity, the major ones are Cartagena Protocol on Biosafety to the Convention on Biological Diversity 2003, the Global Strategy for Plant Conservation, the Nagoya Protocol on Access and Benefit Sharing in the year 2010, a strategic plan for biodiversity from the year 2011 to 2020, the coming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, and the marine and the coastal biodiversity which needs to be protected. The Cartagena Protocol on Biodiversity to the Convention on Biological Diversity, the year 2003, it aimed to protect the biodiversity from potential risks posed by the genetically modified organisms resulting from the modern biotechnology. It was signed in the year 2000 and effective in the year 2003. It works on the precautionary principle which mandates that new biotech products must prioritize safety, allow developing nations to assess public health and economic benefits. The regulations on the genetically modified organisms, countries can ban genetically modified organism imports if scientific safety evidence shows that it is insufficient. Exporters must label their genetically altered commodities. It was required to be ratified by 50 ratifications, which was achieved in May 2003, and it entered into force in September 2003. The membership is, as of July 2020, 173 parties including 170 United Nations member states, the State of Palestine, NU and the European Union. The Cartagena Protocol 2003. This protocol on biosafety establishes crucial mechanisms to regulate the transboundary movement of living modified organisms, ensuring that importing countries are equipped with essential information to make informed decisions regarding the import, the export and transit of such organisms. It adopts the precautionary approach to biosafety, acknowledging the potential unseen risks associated with introducing the living modified organisms into the environment, and encourages nations to take precautionary measures to mitigate any potential adverse effects. It is central to the protocol in the concept of prior informed consent, emphasizing the necessity of obtaining consents from importing countries before exporting the living modified organisms. This ensures that the recipient nations are fully aware of any potential risks associated with the LMOs and can make informed decisions without their importation. Additionally, the protocol introduces concept of advance informed agreement for intentional transboundary movement of LMOs intended for direct release into the environment, requiring exporters to obtain explicit consent from importing countries before such movements occur. Recognizing the importance of capacity building and technical assistance, particularly for developing nations, the protocol advocates for international cooperation and support in areas such as risk assessment, risk management and technology transfer to facilitate the effective implementation of biosafety measures. Then comes the advantages of Cartagena and the disadvantages. There is a list which I have given of the advantages and a list of disadvantages. Advantages are, it is safety of LMOs as well as environment. There should be a regulatory framework which works on checks and balances and regulations of import and export of the LMOs. It works for promotion of safe biotechnology, equilibrium between safety considerations and scientific advancements. It works for public awareness and participation, community engagement and awareness about genetic modifications. Protection of developing nations, the precautionary approach to be adopted by them. Disadvantages are, countries lack technical expertise, resources to conduct the risk assessment. Protocols can be falsely used to justify trade barriers. Scientific and technological limitations for irregularities in the scientific abilities of different countries. The economic implementations, the financial burden on poor nations can be immense. Conflicting international agreements, conflicts in trade related aspects like with WTO and WIPO regarding intellectual property. The global strategy for plant conservation, which came out in 2002, was the slow plant extinctions by 2010. This was adopted in April 2002 based on the Gran Canaria Declaration. It implemented to conserve plant diversity globally. This strategy for plant conservation, adopted in 2002 by the parties to the CBD, it's a comprehensive framework aimed at addressing the conservation and sustainable use of plant diversity worldwide. It outlines a 60-point plan designed to slow the rate of plant extinctions and promote the conservation of plant species and their habitats by 2010. The GSPC emphasizes the importance of integrating plant conservation efforts into broader biodiversity conservation strategies and recognizes the critical role of plants in supporting ecosystem functions, providing food security and contributing to human well-being and sustainable development goals. Now comes the Nagoya Protocol in the year 2010. It ensures the fair and equitable benefit sharing of benefits from genetic resources. It was adopted in the year 2010, but entered into force in the year 2014. It is an agreement to the CBD which contributes to biodiversity conservation. This protocol on access to genetic resources and the fair and equitable sharing of benefits arises from their utilization, adopted in 2010. It is a supplementary agreement to the Convention of CBD. It provides a transparent legal framework to ensure the fair and equitable sharing from utilizing genetic resources. This protocol aims to promote the conservation of biodiversity while fostering sustainable development by requiring prior informed consent and mutually agreed terms for accessing genetic resources. It enhances legal certainty and it facilitates access to these resources, thereby promoting collaboration and fostering a more equitable distribution of benefits amongst countries and indigenous communities. What are the key features? The key features are access and benefit sharing. Countries must ensure that genetic resources under their jurisdiction are accessed only with the prior informed consent of the party providing such resources, contingent upon mutually agreed terms. If one party does not agree, then the transaction cannot take place. Compliance. This requires countries to develop the national ABS regulations and establish competent national authorities to oversee and enforce these regulations. It is the traditional knowledge. It includes specific provisions to handle the genetic resources associated with traditional knowledge held by the indigenous and local communities, ensuring that benefits from the use of such knowledge are shared with them. The capacity building. The protocol promotes capacity building and development initiatives that aid countries, particularly the developing countries, in implementing its requirements. The global multilateral benefit sharing mechanism. It promotes a global mechanism to share benefits from the utilization of genetic resources that occur in the transboundary situation for which it is impossible to grant or obtain prior informed consent. So, what is the impact of these features? Since its implementation, the Nagoya Protocol has had a substantial influence on how genetic resources are accessed and then used globally. It has fostered greater legal certainty and transparency for both the provider and the user of genetic resources. It enhances scientific research and commercial development. It has helped in recognizing and strengthening the rights of the indigenous communities over their traditional knowledge. The challenges which have been faced by the protocol are that despite its advantages, varying interpretations and implementations of guidelines across countries have led to legal complexities. There are concerns about its potential to impose burdensome obligations on researchers and companies and possibly hindering biodiversity research and development. The strategic plan for biodiversity 2011 to 2020 is, the goals are to address biodiversity loss which has taken place on a very accelerated manner. It reduces the pressures, improve status, enhance benefits and improve implementation. The IIT biodiversity targets are 20 targets addressing strategic goals. This plan was adopted in the year 2010 at the 10th meeting of Conference of the Parties of the CBD, and it serves as a comprehensive framework for global biodiversity conservation efforts. It encompasses the IIT biodiversity targets comprising of 20 specific goals aimed at addressing the underlying causes of biodiversity loss, reducing direct pressure on biodiversity, improving the status of the same and enhancing the benefits derived from the same by an enhanced implementation through participatory planning and capacity building. This emphasizes the integration of biodiversity considerations into broader sustainable agendas and seeks to mainstream biodiversity across government policies and sectors to achieve its ambitious conservation objectives. What are the IIT biodiversity targets? It was established by the Convention on Biological Diversity in the year 2010. There are 20 specific goals which are aimed for conserving and sustainably using the global biodiversity by 2020. These targets are organized into 5 strategic goals, which are integrating the biodiversity values into national and global development agendas to increase awareness and support biodiversity, reducing the direct pressure on biodiversity by promoting sustainable use and reducing habitat loss, pollution, overfishing and invasive species, improving the status of biodiversity by safeguarding ecosystems, species and genetic diversity through significantly increasing conservation areas both on the land and in the ocean. Then fourthly, enhancing the benefits to all from biodiversity and ecosystem services by restoring and safeguarding ecosystems that provide essential services and contribute to health, livelihoods and well-being. Lastly is enhancing implementation through participatory planning, knowledge management and capacity building by supporting national biodiversity strategies, promoting traditional knowledge and mobilizing financial resources. So, these targets served as a framework for international efforts to safeguard the nature, but have revealed mixed results upon their 2020 deadline, which leads to calling for extension and enhanced efforts in the future of biodiversity frameworks. The post 2020 global biodiversity framework, there is a developmental process, a new framework to develop to guide action through till 2030, place a draft which is released in 2021, finalizing during COP15 meetings and the adoption which took place in 2022. The post 2020 global biodiversity framework is a strategic plan developed to steer global efforts in biodiversity conservation beyond 2020, guiding actions through 2030, building upon the strategic plan for biodiversity 2011 to 2020. It aims to halt biodiversity loss, designate 30% of the land and sea as protected areas and promote sustainable development worldwide. It emphasizes the urgent need for collective action, enhanced cooperation and strengthened commitments from the government, from the organization, from the communities and other like-minded people to address the growing threats to biodiversity and the ecosystems, where the well-being of the present and the future generations are threatened. The marine and the coastal biodiversity. The focus area is a significant CBD focuses on the marine and the coastal biodiversity. Workshops are held to identify ecologically or biologically significant marine areas and propose new areas. International legal framework. The aim is to develop an internationally legally binding instrument under the UNCLOS for marine biodiversity conservation. The mechanism is area-based planning integrating the EBSA's vulnerable marine ecosystems and marine protected areas. Linkage with the European Union directive is, it is integration with the European Union Marine Strategy Framework Directive for cohesive marine biodiversity conservation efforts. Now comes a list of all the COP meetings which have taken place under the CBD and the decisions which have been taken by them over a period of time starting from 1994. So, the first COP meeting was held in the Bahamas. It was the decisions was medium term program of work, which was working for the convention up to the year 2000, outlining priorities, scientific and technical advice. The clearinghouse mechanism establishes a clearinghouse mechanism to promote and facilitate technical and scientific cooperation, a financial mechanism for the developing countries to develop, and the mechanism for financial operation of the convention, which is primarily operated through the Global Environment Facility or the GEF. National reports, agreement on the need for parties to produce national reports for the implementation of the convention, which is a key component in assessing progress globally, and then the location of the secretariat. The second COP meeting took place in Indonesia. The outcomes of the meeting were marine and coastal biological diversity, which emphasized the importance of marine ecosystems, their conservation and sustainable use. Integrated marine and coastal area management target the conservation of coral reefs, mangroves and other marine habitats, aiming to enhance biodiversity conservation while promoting sustainable use of ocean and coastal resources. The conference expanded the role of clearinghouse mechanism to enhance scientific and technological cooperation. This addressed the need to increase financial resources and establish the first roster of experts to support the scientific and technical advice. The third COP meeting took place in Argentina. It was the adoption of the Buenos Aires Declaration, which emphasized the need for integration of biodiversity consideration into sectoral or cross-sectoral plans, programs and policies at different levels of the government and various other sectors. The protocol on biodiversity, the parties agreed to the development of a protocol on biosafety, specifically focusing on the safe transfer, handling and use of living modified organisms resulting from the biotechnology, which could have adverse effects on the conservation and sustainable use of biological diversity. Then the work program on agricultural biodiversity. This was initiated as a broad and comprehensive work program on agricultural biodiversity to address the issues related on the sustainable use of genetic resources in agriculture in synergy with the conservation of biodiversity. COP 4 meeting was held in the Bahamas. It focused on operationalizing the convention. It resulted in the adoption of the Bratislava Declaration, which called for enhanced national action and international cooperation for biodiversity conservation. It prioritized the development of national strategies and action plans. Attention was given to the implementation of ecosystem approach as a primary framework for action under the convention. This addressed the issues of alien species and the need for effective education and awareness regarding biodiversity conservation. The COP 5 meeting, the first extraordinary meeting of the Conference of the Parties, took place in 1999, which was in Cartagena, Colombia. This meeting was pivotal as it focused on finalizing the Cartagena Protocol on Biosafety, which addresses the issues of safe handling, transfer and use of LMOs that may adversely affect the biological diversity and the risk to human health. The protocol was not adopted at the meeting due to certain disagreements, and the continued negotiations ultimately led to its adoption in the year 2000, with the protocol taking effect in the year 2003. This was a significant step in global environment and genetic safety regulations. The sixth meeting was held in Nairobi, Kenya. It was instrumental in advancing the global agenda. The meeting emphasized the development and enforcement of the national biodiversity strategies and action plans, which were critical for achieving the goals of the convention. The key outcomes included the adoption of the global strategy for plant conservation, aiming to halt the loss of plant diversity, and endorsement of the ecosystem approach as a primary strategy for management of land, water and living resources. This addressed access to genetic resources and the fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising from their utilization. The COP6 meeting was held in Netherlands. This was adopted as the strategic plan for convention, which set out goals and objectives for the biodiversity management up till the year 2010. It was an agreement on the guidelines for implementing the Cartagena Protocol. The meeting emphasized the integration of biodiversity considerations into sectors of agriculture, fisheries and tourism to promote sustainable practices. It launched the initiative on the Global Taxonomy Initiative to address knowledge gaps. The COP7 meeting was held in Malaysia in Kuala Lumpur. This declaration emphasized the linkage between biodiversity and achievement of the MDGs or the Millennium Development Goals, urging nations to integrate biodiversity considerations into national development and poverty elevation agendas. The protected areas, it was adopted as a program to work on the protected areas, which provide a framework to establish and maintain comprehensively, effectively managed and ecologically representative national and regional systems of the protected areas. The forest biodiversity, it enhanced measures were adopted for implementation of the work program on forest biodiversity. It aimed to address issues such as reduction of deforestation, forest degradation, loss of forest biodiversity. Mountain biodiversity, this meeting adopted a detailed work program on the mountain biodiversity to address the specific needs and challenges faced by mountain ecosystems and their biodiversity. The COP8 meeting was held in Brazil. The outcomes were adoption of the Curitiba Declaration, emphasizing the link between biodiversity, human well-being and poverty eradication. It saw the advancement of global strategy for plant conservation and establishment of a global network to share information on invasive alien species. The focus was on promoting biodiversity friendly practices in areas such as agriculture and fisheries and enhancing the integration of biodiversity issues into business and development policies. The COP8 addressed the need for capacity building, technology transfer to support biodiversity conservation in the developing countries. COP9 meeting was held in Bonn, Germany. It was the adoption of the resource mobilization strategy to enhance financial resources for biodiversity. It focused on advancing the agenda on biofuels and their impact on biodiversity and promoting sustainable production and use. The Bonn guidelines on access to genetic resources and fair and equitable sharing of benefits laid the groundwork for the later Nagoya Protocol. It adopted decisions on a range of thematic areas like forest biodiversity, invasive alien species and the ecosystem approach with particular attention to marine and coastal biodiversity, including the deep seabed genetic resources beyond national jurisdictions. COP10 meeting was held in Japan. This was the conference was ratified of the Nagoya Protocol on access to genetic resources and fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising from their utilization. It established international frameworks to ensure the benefits are shared fairly and equitably within the countries and the communities. COP10 adopted the Strategic Plan for Biodiversity 2011-12, including the Aichi targets, and set ambitious goals to save the same to enhance its benefits for the people. It saw agreements on strategy for resource mobilization to support and achieve the convention's goals, recognizing the need for increased funding to protect biodiversity and the focus on integration of biodiversity into policies, strategies and planning processes and the sustainable use of its components. The meeting underscored the need of the parties to develop national targets and to revise and update their national biodiversity strategies and action plans in line with the strategic plan. COP12 was held in Hyderabad, India. It is also significant under the CBD because the conference gathered international delegates to address various issues related to conservation and sustainable use. It included the strategic plan for the 2011 to 2020 period and the targets aimed at reducing biodiversity loss. It emphasized the need for increased funding, enhanced implementation by member states to meet the required targets and taking crucial steps in its conservation initiatives. The COP12 meeting took place in North Korea. It was the participants engaged in discussions regarding the strategic plan of 2011-2020, the Aichi targets and the set for achievement within the decade. This Outlook 4 report played a key role in guiding these discussions. They conducted a midway review which is committed to promoting the conservation and sustainable use of nature. The conference, a total of 35 resolutions were passed and they emphasized the integration of gender perspectives into biodiversity analysis. The summit concluded with the adoption of the Pyeongchang Roadmap, outlining strategies for achieving biodiversity goals through technological collaboration, financial support and capacity building for developing nations. COP13 meeting took place in Mexico in the year 2016. It was the 13th conference in Cancun. It advanced the agenda with focus on mainstreaming biodiversity across government and society, integrating it into sectors like agriculture, forestry, fisheries and tourism. This declaration was pivotal outcome by underscoring the role of conservation and the sustainable use of biodiversity in achieving sustainable development. It urged for action to incorporate biodiversity considerations into sectoral and cross-sectoral plans, programs and policies, emphasizing the interconnected nature of biodiversity with economic activities and human well-being. The COP14 meeting also was a comprehensive consensus held in Egypt for mitigating the escalating crisis of nature degradation and loss of biodiversity. The participants endorsed the voluntary guidelines to support creation and execution of the ecosystem-based strategy for climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction, a collective resolution to intensify efforts towards fulfilling the Aichi biodiversity targets by 2020. Committed to achieving these targets were planned to be implemented across various levels, encompassing global, regional, national and subnational spheres. In Montreal, Canada, the COP15 meeting took place. It was a milestone where a global biodiversity framework was adopted and it outlined crucial steps to reverse the alarming biodiversity loss by 2030. It involved the government worldwide to establish 23 targets such as protecting 13% of the world's land and marine environment, restoring degraded ecosystems and sustainable management. While the framework was not legally binding, it institutes a systematic reporting mechanism which provides progress reports. Discussions were held on equitable benefit sharing from use of genetic resources, promoting a decision to create a related multilateral fund with details to be finalized at the COP16 meeting. Responses to the GBF have varied. They centered on the rights of the indigenous people and the absence of a distinct biodiversity fund separate from the United Nations existing fund. There was widespread acknowledgement of the framework's importance. The UK was committed to implementing the GBF, intending to outline its approach on environmental improvement plan set for release in 2023, signaling a proactive stance on global biodiversity challenges. The Conference of Parties is to be held in the year 2024. This is to take place in Colombia from October 21st to November 1st, 2024. It will assess the progress report of national goals and targets under the coming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. After destructive earthquakes in Turkey, Colombia offered to host COP16, which was accepted. COP16 will focus now on turning the ambitious goals and 23 targets of the Global Biodiversity Framework into national action, mobilizing resources to close the biodiversity financial gap and address access and benefit sharing for genetic resources. So, I would like to conclude now my presentation by talking about the CBD, which represents a foundational international framework which is dedicated to preserving biological diversity, promoting the sustainable use and ensuring equitable benefit sharing from genetic resources. The major strength lies in its approach encompassing three crucial protocols, which was the Cartagena Protocol and the Nagoya Protocol. The CBD faces various challenges in its enforcement and compliance. Differences in national capacities and political will can lead to uneven implementation, while the voluntary nature of some of its commitments means that tangible outcomes can be inconsistent across countries. The COP meetings have been instrumental in advancing the CBD's objectives, with key decisions that include adopting the protocols, setting the global biodiversity targets, and the effectiveness of these decisions often depends on subsequent national action, which is hindered by insufficient funding, technical capacity, specifically in the developing countries. The implications of the treaty: there is resistance from the Western countries. It has been critiqued for encountering resistance, particularly from the Western countries, which are perceived to be reluctant to fully engage with provisions that are seen as favoring the global south. The resistance stems from concerns about economic implications of stringent biodiversity protections, which affect commercial interests, particularly the biotechnology and pharmaceutical sectors, where genetic resources play a crucial role. The softening of the treaty enforcement: the treaty guidelines and targets are clear. The actual enforcement and adherence to these rules have become flexible and less stringent. The shift has been perceived as undermining the effectiveness of the convention, allowing countries more leverage in how they meet their commitments, which can dilute ambitious biodiversity goals. So, the outcomes are they bring out the strengths and weaknesses which by way of the protocols. The Cartagena Protocol enhances biodiversity by regulating the transboundary movement of the LMOs, but its impact is limited by scientific complexity and the various degrees of regulatory capacity among the parties. The Nagoya Protocol has significantly advanced the fair distribution of benefits from genetic resources, but faces issues with clarity and enforcement that need to be addressed. Looking forward, the future of biodiversity governance under the CBD appears robust yet challenging. It will require enhanced international cooperation, increased financial investment, and stronger legal mechanism to ensure that the ambitious goals set by the global community are achieved, fostering a sustainable coexistence between human progress and the natural world. That is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Hello, I am Shikha Dikshit. I teach psychology and I am with the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences at IIT Kanpur. Today I am going to talk about what is social cognition. Social cognition is a research area in psychology which explicates the various cognitive processes that people employ to understand the social world. So, essentially it is about sense making of the social world, which involves understanding other people as well as understanding oneself. Understanding others requires understanding their traits, their internal tendencies, their contextual aspects, motives, feelings, emotions, etc. So, as we can see, This is a very complex process and requires a massive amount of information processing. Even for small decisions, for simple decisions, people have to process a large amount of information. The main perspective or the approach which is used in social cognition is obviously the cognitive approach, and which is the study of mental structures and processes. The main paradigm which is used is the information processing paradigm. As far as the range of topics in social cognition is concerned, the range is very wide, from individual level sense making to collective sense making.